You come to prayer with me this morning, embracing and loving God of so many names. Thank you for bringing us together once again this morning. But be with us now as we share the true spirit of Christ within each of us. Let us be that gift to one another through your guidance, while at the same time opening our hearts this morning, but even more opening our minds so that we may be the receptors of your word that's about to be spoken. So I ask now that you would touch my lips of clay, mold them into the words that need to be spoken this morning, and the words that come from my mouth and the meditations that come from each and every one of our hearts. May they be ever acceptable to you. In Christ we pray. Amen. So you know that this past week on Christmas Eve, I flew back home to New Jersey for the Christmas holidays, and it was a time for me to return home, having a great week with family and friends, watching the little ones tear the wrapping paper off of their gifts on Christmas afternoon, and watching four little ones this year was quite the amazing thing. There was paper flying everywhere. But it was a time also that, for me, taking Christmas seriously as I do, while seeing all the glimpses of winter, the lights and all the decorations that were displayed in the neighborhoods, and even at the hotel, was glimmered with sure Christmas. But as I returned to the airport, landing in O'Hare, after going through the tunnel to baggage claim at United Airlines, and hearing that tacky rendition of the United Airlines theme song, which I will not hum, and all those neon lights, if you've ever been to O'Hare as you go through out to the baggage service. And there I was. I'd landed in baggage service. And at the baggage carousel, I noticed something hanging over the top of the hole where the luggage comes out. And I'm sure you guessed it. It's that tacky piece of plastic mistletoe that Mark mentioned last week. But thank goodness I didn't have to kiss my baggage goodbye with the attendant as I left New Jersey. But as the bag started flying through the chute onto the belt in O'Hare, kind of worrying if I was going to see my bag, because I forgot to give it a kiss goodbye in New Jersey. I was happy to see that my luggage very gently came off the belt and gave it a big kiss as I pulled it off of the luggage thing and handed it to my car. You see, the true gift of Christmas was getting my luggage back intact, especially over the holidays, even without TSA rummaging through it and leaving their little friendly note saying, "Hi, we've been through your luggage. Merry Christmas." See, even the pastor listens to the sermons when he's not here. Thought it was a very profound little anecdote that Mark shared while I was gone last week. But couldn't have fit better with traveling on the holidays. So over the past 5 weeks or so, we've been reclaiming those values of Christmas back into our lives. But as we were preparing ourselves for the magical moment that happened in the manger, it also prepared us for the gifts that we bring back, not only to ourselves, but to those in our lives. And today, more than 2,000 years after this spectacular event happened, and in the lives of so many, we're back at the manger. Now, you know our gal Sophia says, picture it. 2,000 years ago, there were three dudes, Manny, Mo, and Jack. Oh, wait a minute, that's the Pep Boys. There was Sespar, Balthazar, and Melchior. And I can never get those names right, and so I always give sympathy if anybody has to read those in Scripture on Sunday morning. But they were trying to figure out how to get themselves to the manger. It wasn't like they had the latest and greatest devices to get themselves there, or those fancy GPS gadgets that we have today. So when was the last time you asked someone to give you directions? Or better yet, when was the last time you checked your ego in at the door and asked for directions? So many of us, it's like, oh no, I can do it. My father would be, I'll take care of it, And I'm going to date myself again, but for someone who started driving back in the 70s and the 80s, I can somewhat remember when there was the only way to get somewhere was to ask somebody. Well, you go down this road about 4 blocks and you look for the purple mailbox, and then you make a left, and then you, right? And the other person describing the roads to take, and in particular noted the streets you needed to turn on, while probably also mentioning those notable landmarks along the way. And then there was the renowned Thomas Guide. You know, that spiral book, and heaven forbid that someone tore a page out of it, because if they did, you were really out of luck. And now for my younger folk, you probably came into the era of the internet and had this thing called MapQuest. But you still had to print those out, those step-by-step instructions on how to get to that place. And of course, if you were driving alone, this meant you had to be looking down at the directions while driving. And if you missed one part of those directions and got off course, well, you were out of luck again. Then about 2005, companies like TomTom, I used to love that, a TomTom, and Magellan were producing these navigation devices using this GPS signal, not only to give you directions, but to show you where you were and to help you to get back on course in case you made that mistake. And of course, then just yesterday, I was fortunate enough that I was at the Apple store, not my place to be for 3 hours on a Saturday, but was there for multiple reasons. But reminded me back about 12 years ago when iPhones changed GPS navigation to the world. Took it to a whole new level. You know, Matthew's gospel provides direction and navigation, not as fancy as we have it today, but it provides it where it stands at the center. And it stands at the events that occur in the gospel lesson that we even hear as we celebrate this morning, that allows us to reclaim that epiphany that we celebrate today. You know, we learn from the Magi that they arrive from the east in Jerusalem, having this knowledge and compass that we would call probably today astronomy or astrology or magic or whatever you want to call it. Now, we really don't know where the Magi came from. Some say maybe Persia, some say maybe Babylonia, but those seem to be the most likely options because of where they were coming from. But it was this reclaimed epiphany that they just showed up in Jerusalem and asked, "Where is this child who is to be born the King of the Jews?" And since our GPS isn't getting a satellite signal, we saw this star when it rose, drew us to come and to worship him. Now, the image that we are so most sensitive of seeing of the Magi are usually these exotic men on camels following this distant star. Now, you notice I didn't say hunky men or hunky exotic men, just exotic men in their robes and all their finery. But in Greek text, it makes it clear that this is not always the way things happened. And literally, the Magi say they saw a star at its rising. You know, the Magi had some sort of reclaimed epiphany, that they saw this kind of astronomical event that seemed to be very unique to them. And this event which, of course, prompted them to believe that a Jewish king had been born. Now, in the middle of Matthew's story of the Christ's birth, he gives center stage to these Gentiles from the east and lets them be the first to announce the King of the Jews has been born. But somehow, things in the story always seem to take a twist. When the Magi start asking around Jerusalem for this guidance, this king named Herod hears about it. Now, Herod isn't Jewish, we know that, and on top of that, he's not a nice king. He has already killed off members of his own family to protect his throne. And when Herod hears the news of this new king in town, it makes him nervous. It's kind of like saying there's a new sheriff in town. Now, unexpectedly, these guys show up in Jerusalem. You know, they didn't follow a star there just because of that. But instead, they went to Jerusalem because it was a logical place to look to find a newborn king of the Jews. Now, instead of finding Jesus, they found Herod. And Herod the Great was a survivor, no matter how many times circumstances had stacked up against him. Herod had always managed to come out on top because he thought he was smart and was ruthless. Now keep in mind, our magi are not really as wise as we think they are. Why we gave them the name wise men, I couldn't tell you. But even though they were given that name, we just have to go with the story. Because they didn't know where to go. But it was that reclaimed epiphany in their lives, that this star that was provided by God gave them that start that was to be their guide. Now, you have to realize it's only about 6 miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. So it's not like they were going on a 40-mile trip. And on this part of the journey, and only this part of the journey as it was described as a star that actually led the Magi to the very spot where Jesus was. We hear that after God had brought them to the spot, and they went and they saw the child with Mary, his mother, falling down and worshiping him. There they presented their treasures. They offered him those gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, and they bestowed this gift of honor to this king of the Jews. Now, these magi who may have been distracted by their expectations, they were sent by Herod. We have to remember that, and on their way to see this wonderful thing happen. But they also were there to report back to Herod, and as we know how the story goes, here our friend Herod wanted to be done with Jesus. That so-called new king, he didn't want to be overthrown. His greed and his guilt and his whatever he had. He wasn't going to be overthrown by some new baby coming into the world. But they caught that sight of their star, and we know that it had been there all along. But, their side trip with Herod kind of blocked their view from seeing it. So instead of trusting the sign they had been given to start off with, they were pulled aside and had been given these new ideas of what a king should look like. And then where to find this new king. So back out on the road again, our 3 guys go, and they finally saw the star the way they should have. And they were so overjoyed, they followed that star to the very place where the child could be found. The Christ child sitting in the manger. By itself, that star was not enough to show the Magi where they needed to go, or even to reclaim the Epiphany in their own lives, but it was this detour through Herod that allowed them to refocus, pointing them back in the right direction. It's sometimes when we get off track, we're on that railroad track and we're going down the tracks and we get derailed sometimes. But it's when we get back on the tracks, it allows us to refocus the things that are in our life that are yet to come. Now, not knowing and figuring that Herod himself was up to no good, when the Magi caught the star yet again, they became overjoyed because it allowed them to reclaim this epiphany that was in their life, to reclaim what it was really meant for them to do, and what that star really meant to them. They weren't just looking for a king anymore. They were looking and they were seeking this Messiah. They were looking for the face of God and this encounter with the Emmanuel. This God with us who would change them forever. Now, what changes us in our reclaimed epiphanies in life? What star do we follow in the sky, allowing us to come to the manger? Allowing us to be guided by that star not only in our lives, but the lives of others. There are so many things that come into our life. as we were reclaiming all the different values over this Christmas season, as we reclaimed our hope for the future, and we reclaimed the peace in our lives, and we reclaimed that joy. And then we overcame and we reclaimed the love, bringing that all together when we came Christmas Eve to reclaim that Jesus in our own hearts. I think the question is, how do we respond when God breaks into our lives unexpectedly and brings those miracles of reclaimed Epiphany? Will we be afraid? Like Herod was, losing that power to hold? Would it be that we're overwhelmed and overjoyed, and the facts of knowing that reclaimedness that comes into us, that we're not going to let those things bother us? We're going to be focused on the star that's above, not derailing us, but focusing us as we move forward. I think the answer is that we need to pause and consider the Magi who arrived at the manger in order to worship this Messiah. See, they weren't expected to be there. They really shouldn't have been there in the eyes of the way things were working, but yet, through God's grace, they were led there. They were led to this manger unexpectedly. As I said early on, they came out of nowhere. They came from the east. No one knows where they came from, really. But God led these three wise men to the manger. What are the things in your life that lead you to the manger? A simple star at its rising prompted this journey to Jerusalem, prompted this gift that came to each of us. What prompts you to that simple star that shines so bright in the sky each night? What are the gifts that you bring when you come to the manger? We know these wise men were left and led by another road in the end, changing their course, changing their direction of where they were going in their own lives. And that maybe something as we come into this new year will bring that same change into our hearts. As we follow that star over this next year, where is it going to lead you? What gifts that we've reclaimed are going to follow you into this new year? I'm sure that there are many stories of our encounters of how many times that we maybe have come to the manger. And oftentimes, somewhere and somehow, totally unexpected, but how it changed our guided course as we did. Knowing that we're not going to go back down those same paths or being led entirely in a new direction. That we are facing life with new trust and new hope and the new era of what God brings. The gifts that we bring each and every day. The season of expectant waiting has now become the season of the gift. We've been given that gift. We've been given that love. We've been given that peace and that joy and that hope. And we've been given all of those elements that have brought us to the manger. The gifts that guide us each and every day. So as the three wise men took their moment, they refocused and they reclaimed that epiphany that was taken into their lives. That epiphany that brought them to that manger. Even with all the derailment and all that, they refocused. Over this next coming year, that we need to recognize all of these signs that God gives us. Through all of these gifts that are given to us and all of the things that we reclaim. All of those gifts in our hearts. As we reclaim this epiphany that comes to us this day, we need to look at what the future brings. We need to remember that it's not only this day, but every day. We take those gifts and we reclaim what God gives us. So I pray as we go into this new year of 2020, it's going to be a gift of reclaiming things in our lives, reclaiming the good news of what comes into our lives each and every day, reclaiming God's gifts not only for us, but for the world. So blessings upon us this morning as we reclaim all of this time of year with each and every day of our lives. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.